Reconnais donc maison. Bienvenue donc sur cette édition spéciale. Nous sommes donc à Genève où l'hôtel donc de Paul Biya a donc été saccagé. Alors, donc
qu'est-ce qui va donc se passer? Bonsoir à tous et bienvenue pour cette édition.
Mais voilà le piège. Quand on traduit ce montant en français, ça devient déçu. 24 millions. Et oui, c'est beaucoup plus impressionnant que 34 607 francs suisses. Parce que 24 millions, dans l'imaginaire populaire, c'est une maison modeste, c'est 2 taxis, c'est le capital de départ d'une petite entreprise. Résultat, tout le monde s'énerve, partage la facture, insulte le ministre, et la polémique enfle comme ballon de football sous le soleil. Pourtant, ceux qui connaissent Genève savent qu'avec 3 suites et une semaine de séjour, tu arrives très vite à ce chiffre. C'est ici que la satire prend tout son sens. Parce que le Camerounais moyen, quand il entend 24 millions, il compare avec sa propre vie. Il se dit, voilà, moi je cherche 5000 francs pour mettre le courant chez ENEO, et eux, ils dépensent 24 millions en une semaine à Genève. C'est cette comparaison qui nourrit l'indignation. Mais il faut distinguer 2 choses, le coût réel de la vie à Genève et l'attribution de la dépense. Que Genève soit chère, personne ne conteste. Mais que Samuel Mvondo Ayolo ait sorti cet argent de sa propre poche, ça, rien ne le prouve. Et c'est là que le piège devient évident, l'intox joue sur l'émotion du chiffre. Parce que si la facture avait dit 1500 francs suisses, personne n'aurait bougé. Mais avec 24 millions de CFA, c'est comme jeter du piment dans les yeux du peuple. Ça pique, ça brûle, et tout le monde crie au scandale. Pourtant, si on regarde froidement, c'est juste une dépense plausible dans un hôtel de luxe, pas forcément la preuve d'une dilapidation personnelle. Moralité, une addition salée à Genève n'est pas forcément un crime, mais au Cameroun, quand tu traduis ça en CFA, c'est déjà un péché capital. C'est là que l'intox gagne, elle exploite l'écart entre la réalité internationale et la perception locale. Et pendant que le peuple crie, ceux qui tirent les ficelles rigolent dans l'ombre, parce qu'ils savent que la meilleure arme, ce n'est pas la vérité, mais l'indignation bien dosée. Alors mes chers abonnés, je vous pose la question, est-ce que vous pensez que ce chiffre est la preuve d'une gabegie ministérielle, ou juste une astuce de communication pour enflammer les réseaux sociaux? Dites-le dans les commentaires. Mes chers, plus besoin de preuves, plus besoin de témoins, la rumeur était déjà partie. En moins de temps qu'il ne faut pour faire bouillir une marmite de ndolé, la facture avait envahi WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter et même TikTok. Les Camerounais de Genève s'indignaient, ceux de Douala s'énervaient, ceux de Garoua insultaient, et ceux de Paris envoyaient les captures dans les groupes de diaspora. Bref, c'était devenu un feu de brousse incontrôlable. Et vous savez, au Cameroun, un scandale bien épicé voyage plus vite qu'un avion de Swissair. Mais arrêtons-nous un peu pour analyser la stratégie. Pourquoi une image comme ça devient-elle si virale? Parce que c'est une recette simple comme la bouillie du matin. 1. On prend un nom célèbre ici, un ministre proche du président. 2. On ajoute un lieu prestigieux, Genève, capitale des séjours présidentiels. 3. On assaisonne avec un montant astronomique, 24 millions de francs CFA. 4. Et on mélange le tout dans la marmite des réseaux sociaux. Résultat, une indignation nationale, des débats houleux, et tout le monde devient expert en finances publiques. Même le conducteur de mototaxi qui n'a jamais vu l'intérieur d'un hôtel 5 étoiles se met à commenter comme un inspecteur des impôts, hein, donc c'est avec notre argent qu'ils font ça là-bas? Le plus satirique dans cette affaire, c'est la manière dont les Camerounais consomment l'information. Personne ne prend le temps de demander, mais attendez, est-ce que l'hôtel a confirmé? Est-ce que le document est authentique? Non. On prend, on copie, on colle, et on envoie dans les groupes WhatsApp de famille, de tontines et même de prières. Oui mes chers, même les groupes de prière reçoivent ce genre de facture. Après, amen, c'est « Avez-vous vu ce que le ministre a dépensé à Genève ?» Et puis, l'indignation, c'est aussi un sport national chez nous. Les Camerounais adorent s'indigner, parce que ça donne l'impression de participer à la politique. Tu n'as pas d'électricité depuis 2 jours, mais tu as trouvé une facture de 24 millions sur Facebook, ça te permet de crier, d'insulter, et de te sentir citoyen engagé. C'est comme une soupape pour évacuer la colère quotidienne. Mais attention, cette vitesse de propagation ne tombe pas du ciel. Elle est orchestrée. Derrière une telle diffusion, il y a toujours des mains invisibles qui connaissent bien la psychologie du peuple. Ils savent que quand tu balances un chiffre qui dépasse l'entendement, les gens ne réfléchissent plus, ils réagissent. C'est ça qu'on appelle en communication la stratégie du choc et émotion. Et là, mes chers, le coup était bien joué. Sauf que, et c'est là que Kamenius intervient, quand on gratte la surface, on découvre vite que l'image ne tient pas debout. Mais avant que cette vérité n'arrive, la rumeur avait déjà fait le tour du pays. Comme on dit chez nous, le mensonge a déjà voyagé 1000 km pendant que la vérité est encore en train de lasser ses chaussures. Alors chers abonnés, vous voyez bien que cette facture est devenue un symbole. Symbole de la colère populaire, symbole de la méfiance envers les élites, mais aussi symbole d'une société où une simple capture d'écran peut devenir une arme de destruction massive. Et vous, que pensez-vous? Cette indignation était-elle justifiée, ou sommes-nous tombés une fois de plus dans le piège de la manipulation numérique? Regard d'expert, pourquoi la facture pose problème? Mesdames et messieurs, voici maintenant le moment où on prend la loupe et on scrute la facture comme un instituteur de village corrige la copie d'un élève paresseux. Parce que si vous regardez bien, vous allez voir que ce document qui fait trembler les réseaux sociaux est rempli d'erreurs dignes d'un faux montage de quartier. D'abord, l'absence de nom. Oui, mes frères, mes sœurs. Un hôtel de standing, ce n'est pas un bar de quartier où tu bois 3 bières, tu pars et tu laisses la note suspendue en disant « Le vieux du Carrefour va payer demain ». Non. Dans un hôtel comme le Mandarin Oriental, chaque facture est obligatoirement rattachée à un client, on écrit ton nom, le numéro de ta chambre, la durée de ton séjour, parfois même ton moyen de paiement. Or ici, silence radio. La facture est orpheline. Pas de nom, pas de chambre, pas de date précise. C'est comme si tu trouvais un cahier d'école sans nom, sans classe et sans école, tu sais déjà que c'est suspect. Ensuite, l'histoire de la fameuse GST. Ah, là vraiment, j'ai ri. GST veut dire Good and Service Tax. Ça, c'est une taxe qui existe dans des pays comme l'Inde, l'Australie ou Singapour. Mais en Suisse? Jamais de la vie. Chez eux, c'est la TVA, la vraie, avec des taux clairs, 8,1% pour le standard, 3,8% pour l'hôtellerie. C'est écrit partout, même sur le site de l'administration fiscale suisse. Donc si la facture du Mandarin Oriental commence à parler de GST, sachez que ce n'est plus Genève, c'est plutôt Bombay. Autrement dit, les faussaires ont tellement copié-collé qu'ils ont oublié de faire les devoirs. Et ce n'est pas fini. La facture montre aussi des libellés farfelus comme « Suite indulgence »,« Short et suite » et tenez-vous bien, GNC Cars VVIP. Ah mes chers, depuis quand un palace genevois facture les voitures en dizaines d'unités comme si c'était les bananes qu'on vend au marché d'Obala. Un hôtel de ce niveau facture par type de chambre, par nombre de nuits, éventuellement par service spécifique comme un spa ou un transfert aéroport, mais jamais GNC Cars VVIP, comme si on achetait les voitures par paquet de 10. Et le plus drôle, c'est le libellé « Short et suite ». Ça ressemble plus à une blague de stand-up qu'à une ligne comptable d'un hôtel 5 étoiles. Continuons avec le fameux service charge. Mes frères, en Suisse, le service est inclus dans le prix. On ne facture pas ça séparément comme dans certains pays. Donc cette ligne-là aussi, c'est un gros faux pas. C'est comme si un cuisinier te vendait le plat de ndolé, puis ajoutait « frais de piment » en supplément. Ce n'est pas dans leurs habitudes. Et maintenant, parlons du fameux QR code. On nous a dit que ça prouve l'authenticité. Eh bien non. Quand on a scanné le code, il n'a pas renvoyé vers une base hôtelière sécurisée, ni vers un site officiel, mais simplement vers un texte inséré manuellement. Bref, c'est comme imprimer un faux billet et dire « Regardez, il y a les dessins, donc c'est vrai ». N'importe quel graphiste de quartier peut fabriquer ça avec un logiciel gratuit. Pire encore, les horaires ne collent pas. La facture parle de 16h38, mais dans le code, c'est écrit 4h38 de l'après-midi. 2 heures différentes pour le même document? C'est comme si ton relevé bancaire indiquait que tu as retiré de l'argent à Yaoundé et à Douala en même temps. C'est incohérent, point final. Alors vous voyez, mes chers abonnés, quand on regarde cette facture de près, on se rend compte que c'est un document bricolé à la va-vite, sans rigueur, sans vérification, juste conçu pour choquer les yeux et frapper l'imagination. C'est un peu comme ces chaussures chinoises qui brillent beaucoup au marché mais qui se déchirent après 2 jours. Et le plus satirique dans l'affaire, c'est que malgré toutes ces incohérences, des milliers de personnes ont cru dur comme fer que c'était une preuve en béton. Voilà comment une simple photo devient une arme de manipulation massive. Et moi je vous le dis, un faux bien fait peut tromper un non-initié, mais un faux mal fait comme celui-ci, c'est une insulte à l'intelligence collective. Alors chers abonnés, ouvrez l'œil. Posez-vous toujours la question, est-ce que ce document respecte les règles de base? Est-ce qu'il contient les mentions habituelles? Parce que si on ne fait pas attention, on va finir par croire que même un ticket de bar peut faire tomber un ministre. Partie 3. Remettre les chiffres dans leur contexte, luxe, protocole et mathématiques. Mes frères, mes sœurs, asseyez-vous bien, parce que ce que je vais dire là peut donner le vertige. Une facture de 34 607 francs suisses, soit environ 24 millions de nos francs CFA, ça fait peur hein. Même un commerçant de Ndokoti qui vend du poisson depuis 30 ans n'a jamais vu ça passer une seule fois dans sa caisse. Mais la vraie question est simple, est-ce que ce montant suffit, à lui seul, à prouver que le ministre Samuel Mvondo Ayolo s'est amusé à Genève comme un milliardaire en vacances? Ou bien est-ce simplement un chiffre sorti de son contexte pour nous faire danser le makossa de l'indignation? D'abord, remettons les choses dans leur contexte, Genève n'est pas Douala, encore moins Bafoussam. Là-bas, la vie est chère comme si chaque morceau de pain avait traversé l'Atlantique en première classe. Une nuit dans une suite de palaces genevois comme le Mandarin oriental peut coûter entre 2500 et 5000 francs suisses. Et si tu veux la suite présidentielle avec vue sur le Rhône et service VIP, prépare au moins 10 000 francs suisses par nuit. Traduction en CFA, c'est comme si tu payais la scolarité d'un enfant du primaire dans une école privée, pour une seule nuit de sommeil. Alors, si tu prends 2 ou 3 suites, que tu ajoutes quelques nuits, que tu commandes 2 bouteilles de champagne et que tu fais rouler une voiture de location avec chauffeur, la facture monte vite à 30 000 ou 40 000 francs suisses. Ce n'est pas de la magie noire, c'est juste la logique mathématique du luxe européen. Donc le chiffre de 34 607 francs suisses, présenté comme une bombe, n'a rien d'exceptionnel dans ce type d'hôtel. C'est cher, oui, mais ce n'est pas un délire personnel, comme certains veulent le faire croire. Maintenant, venons au protocole d'État. Est-ce que vraiment vous croyez qu'un ministre de la Présidence, en mission officielle à Genève, va sortir sa carte bleue personnelle pour payer l'hôtel de la délégation? Allons seulement. Ce n'est pas un voyage de vacances où chacun règle sa chambre à la réception. Dans ce genre de déplacement, les frais sont pris en charge par le protocole d'État, et les factures sont émises au nom des institutions, pas au nom de Monsieur X ou Y. C'est une organisation stricte, avec convention, signature et justificatif. Alors, croire qu'un haut fonctionnaire paie lui-même 34 000 francs suisses cash, c'est un peu comme croire qu'un éléphant passe par la porte arrière d'une case. Mais voilà le piège, quand on traduit ce montant en francs CFA, ça devient un vrai coup de massue. 24 millions. Et oui, c'est beaucoup plus impressionnant que 34 607 francs suisses. Parce que 24 millions, dans l'imaginaire populaire, c'est une maison modeste, c'est 2 taxis, c'est le capital de départ d'une petite entreprise. Résultat, tout le monde s'énerve, partage la facture, insulte le ministre, et la polémique enfle comme ballon de football sous le soleil. Pourtant, ceux qui connaissent Genève savent qu'avec 3 suites et une semaine de séjour, tu arrives très vite à ce chiffre. C'est ici que la satire prend tout son sens. Parce que le Camerounais moyen, quand il entend 24 millions, il compare avec sa propre vie. Il se dit, voilà, moi je cherche 5000 francs pour mettre le courant chez ENEO, et eux, ils dépensent 24 millions en une semaine à Genève. C'est cette comparaison qui nourrit l'indignation. Mais il faut distinguer 2 choses, le coût réel de la vie à Genève et l'attribution de la dépense. Que Genève soit chère, personne ne conteste. Mais que Samuel Mvondo Ayolo ait sorti cet argent de sa propre poche, ça, rien ne le prouve. Et c'est là que le piège devient évident, l'intox joue sur l'émotion du chiffre. Parce que si la facture avait dit 1500 francs suisses, personne n'aurait bougé. Mais avec 24 millions de CFA, c'est comme jeter du piment dans les yeux du peuple. Ça pique, ça brûle, et tout le monde crie au scandale. Pourtant, si on regarde froidement, c'est juste une dépense plausible dans un hôtel de luxe, pas forcément la preuve d'une dilapidation personnelle. Moralité, une addition salée à Genève n'est pas forcément un crime, mais au Cameroun, quand tu traduis ça en CFA, c'est déjà un péché capital. C'est là que l'intox gagne, elle exploite l'écart entre la réalité internationale et la perception locale. Et pendant que le peuple crie, ceux qui tirent les ficelles rigolent dans l'ombre, parce qu'ils savent que la meilleure arme, ce n'est pas la vérité, mais l'indignation bien dosée. Alors mes chers abonnés, je vous pose la question, est-ce que vous pensez que ce chiffre est la preuve d'une gabegie ministérielle, ou juste une astuce de communication pour enflammer les réseaux sociaux? Dites-le dans les commentaires, parce qu'ici à Kame News, on ne fait pas que parler, on vous donne aussi la parole. Partie 4. Qui gagne à diffuser cette rumeur? Mécanique et conséquences. Mesdames et messieurs, asseyez-vous bien, attachez vos ceintures et ouvrez vos oreilles, car ce que je vais vous dire dépasse parfois la simple logique. Au Cameroun, une rumeur a plus de kilomètres qu'un train express, et quand elle part de Genève, elle arrive à Douala plus vite que l'avion présidentiel. La facture du mandarin oriental n'est qu'un exemple de plus d'une mécanique qui s'est perfectionnée avec le temps. On prend une vérité partielle, on lui colle des faux habits de luxe, puis on la balance sur WhatsApp comme on lance un N-Janson au carrefour, et tout le monde se met à courir derrière, sans même savoir pourquoi. Ici, le but est clair, salir un nom, créer le buzz et semer le doute. Qui gagne dans l'histoire? Pas le citoyen lambda qui n'arrive même pas à trouver le kilo de riz à bon prix, pas le commerçant qui cherche la monnaie pour rendre à sa cliente, non. Celui qui gagne, c'est le maître de la manipulation, celui qui sait qu'au Cameroun, une bonne intox vaut mieux qu'un discours de 3 heures à l'Assemblée nationale. Mais regardons ça en détail. D'abord, il y a les faux experts de Facebook, ceux qu'on appelle les professeurs de WhatsApp. Dès qu'une image sort, ils deviennent comptables, fiscalistes, douaniers, hôteliers et même inspecteurs de police en même temps. Ils partagent, commentent et jurent que « c'est vrai, j'ai mes sources ». Mais leur source, c'est souvent un cousin qui connaît quelqu'un dont la sœur travaille à Genève. Bref, le mensonge a déjà pris l'ascenseur pendant que la vérité est encore en train de chercher un taxi. Ensuite, il y a les opposants pressés. Eux, dès qu'ils voient une facture de 24 millions, leurs yeux brillent, ah voilà, on tient la preuve que le régime vole notre argent. Mais hélas, la politique, ce n'est pas une cuisine où tu mets le piment sans vérifier l'huile. Car si tu cries au scandale sur la base d'infos, demain c'est toi qu'on traite de menteur. Et ce faux bruit profite finalement au régime, qui pourra dire, voyez, on nous accuse pour rien, tout ça ce sont des fake news. Moralité, quand tu veux tendre un piège, assure-toi que ce n'est pas toi-même qui va tomber dedans. Et puis il y a les stratèges de l'ombre, ceux qui connaissent bien l'art de la désinformation. Ce sont eux qui fabriquent ces documents bien parfumés, avec QR code, logo et montant astronomique, juste pour que ça sente le scandale à des kilomètres. Eux savent très bien qu'une simple capture d'écran peut causer plus de dégâts qu'un long rapport de la Cour des comptes. Ils se cachent derrière des profils anonymes, inondent les groupes WhatsApp, et attendent tranquillement que le peuple s'énerve pendant que, ils sirotent leur café. Mais ne riez pas seulement, parce que les conséquences sont graves. D'abord, ça salit la réputation d'un homme public, qu'il soit coupable ou non. Car dans l'esprit de beaucoup, une fois que l'information est passée, on ne retient plus la correction. C'est comme une tache d'huile sur le pagne blanc, même si tu laves, il reste toujours une ombre. Ensuite, ça détourne l'attention du vrai débat. Au lieu de demander pourquoi les hôpitaux manquent d'équipement, pourquoi les enseignants sont en grève, ou pourquoi l'électricité joue à cache-cache, on se met à bavarder sur une facture probablement inventée. Et enfin, ça fragilise la confiance dans l'information. Parce qu'à force de voir des intox, les citoyens ne savent plus distinguer le vrai du faux. Un jour on leur dit que le ministre a dépensé 24 millions, le lendemain on leur dit que c'était faux. Résultat, quand une vraie affaire sort, personne n'y croit plus. Le peuple devient cynique, se dit « tous pareils », et c'est la démocratie elle-même qui perd. Mais comme on dit chez nous, quand la chèvre danse au carrefour, c'est qu'il y a quelqu'un qui joue le tam-tam derrière. Cette facture n'est donc pas une simple blague de réseaux sociaux, c'est une arme politique. Une arme numérique qui, bien maniée, peut déstabiliser un camp, mais mal contrôlée, peut se retourner contre celui qui l'a fabriquée. C'est le jeu dangereux de la politique camerounaise, chacun cherche le buzz, mais personne ne pense à la facture finale que la nation entière devra payer. Alors chers abonnés, vous voyez bien que derrière une simple image se cache toute une stratégie de guerre psychologique. Et la question reste ouverte, qui joue réellement du tam-tam derrière cette danse de la facture? Est-ce un camp politique qui veut affaiblir un rival? Est-ce une main étrangère qui profite de nos divisions? Ou est-ce simplement un farceur qui voulait faire rire le quartier et a fini par déclencher un incendie national? Voilà la vraie question que Kame News met sur la table. Conclusion, ce que nous recommandons est la question pour vous. Bilan clair et net, la facture qui circule présente des incohérences techniques sérieuses, et rien dans le document disponible ne permet d'affirmer que Samuel Mvondo Ayolo a personnellement réglé 34 607 francs suisses. La piste la plus probable reste le montage, aggravé par une amplification virale. Mais pour clore proprement, il faut 3 gestes simples des autorités. 1. que l'hôtel confirme ou infirme officiellement l'authenticité du document. 2. Que le protocole publie l'état des réservations liées au déplacement. 3. Que la justice
child that is born to have access to the kind of social security that will give them the health care that is needed for them. Those are things that, had we started 7 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe today we will be redefining where we go as a country through the electoral process.
That strikes a note, because the foundational principle or the foundational philosophy of this podcast was to build the diaspora, ensure that the diaspora is talking to themselves to the extent that the diaspora is going to leverage their resources, their networks, their skills to give back to the continent in an effort to fight against this persistent brain drain from the continent. Because Africa's biggest problem today is the brain drain from the continent. And that is because of the bad governance, which I understand why election is important at a certain point. But we wanted to bring the diaspora to talk to one another. What are you doing that can help you and also help the continent grow better? And I think we can have that conversation some other time after the elections to see where we can build that synergy to work together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's go back to the elections. You said Project C is working with the media. One thing most people note, if you read all international human rights reports, Cameroon media landscape is very, very limited, and journalists suffer a lot of repression when they open up certain conversations. Today is September 20th. Campaigns begin today, which means certain political conversations are going to be highly restricted. So how are you navigating this with the media men and women in Cameroon at this time when there is a Molinex and chef in Cameroon that regulates what people can actually say?
Yeah, let Molinex do what Molinex has to do. But we are going to work with the journalists that we have been working with the journalists, as you mentioned. We put out a press release that the majority of the main newspapers in Cameroon carried it, and that press release was really calling on Cameroonians to make this election a referendum on 43 years of catastrophic governance in Cameroon. And we will continue to work with the journalists. We understand journalism in Cameroon and everywhere in the world comes with tremendous risk. And absolutely, we feel for the Cameroonian journalists who have to work under very difficult circumstances. But we also need to be able to support them in every way possible, whether it's by capacity building, helping them with the tools that are necessary for them to do their work effectively during this challenging time. We will do what we can to support and stand by them.
Yeah, I want to hear about the tools with which you will be working with them, because the obvious tools that they will need are financial resources. They would also need the courage to talk and to write what they want to write. Let me give you an example. Last week, the president's daughter actually called for Cameroonians not to vote for her father. Do you think Cameroonian journalists can carry this topic fluently, freely, and discuss about it in Cameroonian media?
Again, I would never want to speak on behalf. I'm not
asking you to speak on behalf of anybody. I'm just asking your thoughts, your opinion about this.
Yeah, I'm sure that a few of them have carried that in Cameroon.
Yeah, a few. Which means there are some restrictions out there.
No, I don't know what reprisals they have had, but definitely, I know the Cameroonian government. I have been one of the victims of the government myself. I don't talk much about it, but you need courage in moments like this. Courage is capital, and that's what journalism is in itself. That's the capital that they need at this point. Is courage, and courage sometimes can be born through encouragement, right? It's incumbent on us to encourage them to be courageous at this moment.
And that is the mission of Project C, encouraging journalists to be courageous and telling the message as it is to the people.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that we're doing.
So how are you leveraging new media? Because we're in an age where podcasts, social media streaming is rising every day, and despite the internet problems in Cameroon, the message from online influencers actually reaches the base. So how are you working with bloggers at all and podcasters to get this message out?
Yes, that's the phase in which we are now. We're going beyond the traditional media to leverage also social media and work with influencers and bloggers to continue carrying this message as far as and wide as possible.
Tell me how you're doing it.
Well, we're working with a group. We have a strategy that, for now I wouldn't share with the rest of the world, but the headlines of the strategy is essentially this: is to encourage a conversation, to encourage massive participation, to encourage people to understand their responsibility. And it takes, again, different levels. There's obviously the traditional media, there's leveraging technology, there is social media. That's the strategy, and that brings along journalists, influencers, bloggers, people like that, who can be able to help people make the kind of decision that is necessary for them.
Yeah, I know you don't want to discuss strategy, but you would understand that viewers who are watching this from Cameroon and are anxious to know more about how they can participate in the election significantly, meaningfully, to contribute to a positive outcome. They'll want to know more from you on how that can actually happen. So why wouldn't you say one or two things that can give you more information?
And I think I've been very clear about that, the strategy here.
Yeah. How would that person sitting in Nyasaso, for example, get that information from you? Because if we're limited to news media, we are not sure that they may actually get that information.
Which is why I say different levels of engagement. There's the traditional media, there is social media, leveraging, collaborating with influencers and bloggers who get on every mobile phone in Cameroon for anyone who has the internet. And then there is even another level, which is also going to be working with community radio stations as well, because those communicate with the community. Like every communication strategy, you have different levels of engagement, and that's what we're going to be doing. So no level of engagement is going to be left out.
I understand you have a very well crafted out strategy to reach the people out there. So somebody who is, say, in Abongshe, who has very limited access to the internet, has very limited access to every other thing around the world, and that person is listening to this conversation now, where should that person be looking up to get information? Because we are a few days to the elections. 3 weeks may seem very, very long, but a day in politics is significant.
Yeah. And we can go back to the days of when they used to beat drums in a market square, and it's amazing how information flows. When you do a communication strategy, you certainly cannot reach every individual. There is no communication strategy that can do that. But you can hit the maximum number of people that can drive the narrative that takes the conversation from the Facebook screen to the market square in Guzang.
That's so your message to those in Guzang who are listening to this is just stay tuned. The message will get to you one way or the other.
What we will do, what we continuously do, will ensure that the narrative is driven in such a way that it goes to every home, every market square. People will understand. That's how communication works. We certainly cannot reach every voter. And I wish there was a magic wand that could make us do that. We cannot. But what we will do will drive the conversation in such a way, hopefully, that it will get to as many people as possible.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are joining us now, you're watching the Beyond Africa podcast with me, your host, Ngalim Bernard, and my guest, Mr. Are Obenson. And we're discussing elections in Cameroon. We're discussing the diaspora's role. And if you want to learn more, towards the end of this conversation, he's going to be talking about how the diaspora is raising funds, how those use their funds, and if those funds are dedicated to support one candidate, if they have chosen a candidate, or if they are waiting for that magic moment. So this is the Beyond Africa podcast. Let's talk about the coalition. I understand. I've attended some of the meetings you mentioned, mobilization around stakeholders where the candidates and some other stakeholders come to speak, and I've listened to most of them. And one of the questions that keep coming up from the viewers is the coalition. I remember one viewer was very clear, putting a question to Bello Boba Megari when that coalition candidate would be declared. So is a coalition candidate an objective of Project C?
We believe that encouraging the opposition candidates to form a coalition increases the chances of seeing a political transition in Cameroon. That's our belief. Whether we have the leverage or whether we achieve that goal is another question. But what we do is listening to the diaspora, looking at all the questions that have been coming up. We clearly do understand that the political calculus of having a coalition increases the chances for us to see change in Cameroon. That's the position that we have, and we're working towards that.
And what are you seeing? I know you've heard from almost all those candidates that people would think should lead the coalition or should actively contribute towards a coalition. I'm talking here about Issa Chiroma Bekori. I'm talking about Bello Boba Megari. What are you seeing? What are you hearing from them?
Well, we all have heard from these candidates that they also believe, I think that for one, that a coalition it's important, right? But none of them has said and have even gone ahead to say, even if they were not the candidate of the coalition, they thought that having a coalition was necessary and important. We have not seen them move towards getting that coalition. We've had several conversations.
What do you want to see to tell you that they're moving towards that coalition?
Well, absolutely progress, right?
What kind of progress? What is going to be that thing that will tell you that, okay, there is progress here, these people are moving towards a coalition?
Well, an ideal situation would have been that before the ballots were printed, they had a coalition, right? That hasn't happened. The campaigns are beginning, which would have been great if they came out and said, well, 7 of us have come together, and as the campaigns begin, we're going to be campaigning around one candidate. That hasn't happened, right? So, does it mean that ongoing conversations are not taking place? No. They continue to have those conversations, and hopefully, before the elections itself, maybe they arrive at a conclusion. But it hasn't happened. It doesn't mean that the efforts stop here.
What is the main hindrance you hear from them?
I think that there are 3 pieces to this. And the first part is that they do not necessarily represent themselves, right? They represent political parties or groups of political parties. They need that internal consensus to be able to drive the decisions that they make in that coalition. That's one part, which I see as a challenge. The second part is that some of them have worked for many years to build a certain kind of infrastructure or reputation that they may not want to give up, right? In lieu of themselves being the candidate, right? They want to leverage what they have done over the years. Finally, we're human beings and our egos are bigger than us, right? And in times like this, we should be able to rise above that ego and put the interest of the country first. I've said this, it seems simple, it seems simplistic, but I've realized in these conversations that it's a very, very challenging perspective, and they have to make those tough decisions, and that's what's taking time.
All right, so I note internal consensus is a problem. Then leveraging their past milestones that they have built on over the last years is also a problem, and then our personal egos are also a problem. I don't know where you're going to fit this, but I spoke with Prince Michael Ngwese Ekoso, the president of the USDP party, who has been head and center of the move for a coalition candidate over the last years. And he said one of the problems that the candidates face is they have already deposited 30 million to the treasury, and they would want to at least have that money back, which of course on some technical grounds, some technical legal grounds, they may not have it if they don't have a certain threshold in the score. But with this money problem, are you seeing the money problem as a major hindrance to a coalition building?
No, absolutely not.
Have none of them mentioned that the money is a problem to them?
Nobody, that hasn't been come anywhere near the conversations that we've been having. It's never been an issue brought up. So maybe.
Have you heard that from external parties?
No, I haven't. No, I would say yes. That you're in various WhatsApp groups and you see conversations going on there, but that's not necessarily a reflection of the conversations we've had.
Could the internal consensus that is holding it back be one of those reasons? Because there might have been shareholders who put together the 30 million to give to those candidates, and they say, no, you're not going to do that unless we're sure that we're going to have our money back.
Yeah, it could be, because if you have a political party that is invested in an electoral process, then it's the money of the people, right? And so the party should be able to make those decisions. What is primordial at this point, and this is the message that we must keep hammering on, at every level, my dear brother, at every level of our country and its development, we have been held back by our very own limitations. And those limitations is our weaknesses to put our personal interest above that of the country.
I want you
critical at this moment. That is absolutely critical.
I want you to give a message to these candidates you want them to come together and choose or designate or approve one candidate. Just in 1 minute, give that message to them.
Here's what I say. The founders of our country gave their blood and sweat and lives because they had a vision of a prosperous country, that generations will benefit from the richness of our country. 65 years later, that hasn't materialized. Not because our country is not rich, not because our people have not flourished, but because we have stood in the way of the development of the dreams of our founders. And today we stand at the crossroads of history, where we must choose to build on the dreams of those of the founders. That each one of you today represent the founders of our country. The choice that you make will determine what the next 60 years of our country is going to be. That choice cannot be about you. That choice cannot be about your personal wealth, cannot be about your ego, it cannot be about the badge of honor that you are going to receive as president or not. That choice must be about the country. And what that means is that you must make a sacrifice that the founders made, giving their blood and sweat and tears to this country. You must make that sacrifice now. And whatever that sacrifice be, your biggest reward is not whether you become president or not. Your biggest reward is that you put your country first.
Thank you so much. I hope this message resonates with the candidates and they hear what the diaspora Project C is saying through your voice, because that message sounded prophetic, sounded relevant, and sounded very insightful for the moment, and I hope they take the challenge to do that. But before we move any further, let's talk about let's talk about the money you're raising. Are you raising this money to sponsor one candidate at all?
Absolutely not. We don't have a dog in this fight, so to speak. We have no one candidate that we're leaning towards, right? Our goal is to facilitate the process for the Cameroonian people.
You say you don't have a dog in this fight. Does that mean that you are also working for President Biya's candidate?
No, absolutely not. The reason we're not working with Biya, is because we do not want the status quo. I want to be very clear. No.
So you have a dog in this fight, and the dog is the 11 opposition candidate.
It's change, right? That's the dog we have in the fight. It's change, right? Not necessarily. If we were in place for the status quo, then what's the point of Project C? When I say we don't have a dog in the fight, I'm talking about the 11 opposition candidates.
Yeah, so amongst the 11 opposition candidates, you don't have a dog in the fight, you don't have a choice, but you would want them to designate one candidate and you throw your weight behind that candidate. So how much is that weight that you're going to throw behind that candidate?
So, if you look at the pillars of our work in Project C, again, the first one is empowering the electorate. So primordial is empowering the electorate. Secondly, increasing the chances for us to win. That's true if we have a coalition, right? And then obviously, thirdly is mobilization of the masses. That's how we're going to be doing our work. If at the end of the day, there is no coalition, we still would have empowered the Cameroonian people through communications. We still would have mobilized Cameroonians, and hopefully that allows them to make the right decision for the country.
On the press release you issued recently, you say abstention is complicity and participation is resistance. Voting against the current regime is the most powerful way to demand a reset, a real chance at renewal. And we're talking about the coalition and mobilization. But one question that I want to address here is representation at the various polling stations. Irrespective of what you do, you need representation at the various polling stations. ELECAM's job is to guarantee the fairness of the elections at all the polling stations, but that has been called into question. So are you working towards having representation or supporting candidates to have representations at all polling stations?
Absolutely. That's one of the conversations we've had with every one of the candidates. As we talk about coalition, it could be a coalition of the candidates, but it could also be a coalition of the infrastructure that is put in place to ensure that every polling station has a representation of the voice of the people in that polling station. And so we also do encourage that participation to ensure that the votes are tallied and counted, and that once eventually they get to the National Counting Commission, it's a reflection of what happened in the polling station.
So throughout this conversation, you seem to be confident about the strategy with the media, that is the communication strategy, but you don't seem to be confident with the conversations you've had with the candidates. I feel and I see that lack of confidence in your voice. What accounts for that?
Well, because maybe I have not come through as effectively in the conversation with the candidates, because those conversations with the candidates have played out publicly, just as everything else that we've been doing. At the end of the day, we cannot make a decision on behalf of every one candidate. At the end of the day, it comes down to the candidates to make that decision. And I wish I was having this conversation with you and saying, this is our candidate for the coalition, and they have decided we're moving forward. But to your point, absolutely not. I can't tell you what is going to happen. Again, like many Cameroonians, we're frustrated with the process, we're concerned with the process. But I must be hopeful. I must be hopeful in this process that at the end of the day, we can trust individuals, Cameroonians, to actually do what is right for the country, because that's the only way that we can get change in our country.
Let's talk about the polling stations, because that is where the stuff happens, even though the process from the polling station to the Divisional Counting Commission is also a game of its own. But let's stay stuck on the polling stations where we have control. There are organizations like Michelle Ndokis Dosi and Abdurrahman Babas VAR that are trying to put together poll watchers. Are you in any way talking to them?
Yes, we've had conversations with Michelle Ndokis group, DISO, and I know that we are reaching out to 2 other groups to have similar engagements with them. Yes, we hope to be able to support initiatives like that are citizen-led and that could allow for more transparency in the process.
So I had a conversation with Michelle and Kingsley, and they were disappointed with the fact that they tried to engage more organized structures already, like the Catholic Church that has roots everywhere in the country. I think besides the CPDM, they are even more entrenched in the country beyond the CPDM and the government of Cameroon. But they felt a little bit disappointed that the church was not coming out. Have you tried to engage the church in this movement?
There are ongoing engagements or conversations to really try to bring the church into this process. Hopefully that materializes, but I think, just as we are engaging thousands of stakeholders in Cameroon now, we hope that the church is also going to come into the process, because yes, to your point, the church is a very organized structure and should participate. Why? Because the church is made up of citizens, and citizen participation is what we ask of. And so encouraging the clergy to advise the people to participate in this process is also important.
Again, what I hear from you is everything is ongoing and there is basically nothing that has been achieved so far, a few days to the elections. Does that signal a status quo repeat, or does that signal a point where something may just change within the clap of the fingers?
There has been a lot of progress. There's been tremendous progress in the last 6 weeks that we've been doing this. A lot of things that you may not have realized. But there's a big discussion now in Cameroon about making this election a referendum. Go back 2 weeks, you would not see that conversation. But now it's happening in Cameroon. That's how change happens.
So tell me, how does making an election a referendum change the fact that it is an election?
It's a mindset. It's a mindset, my brother.
A mindset that does what?
People may be to a call. People will respond to a call to action. That's what makes the difference.
But what is a call to action when it's a referendum on an election? What makes that difference?
Yeah, because a referendum makes it a significant choice.
Over what? Between what and what?
You read the press release, right? And you
I have it here in front of me.
You can go back to quote what's on the press release, which states that abstinence is siding with the status quo, right? Participation is resistance, right? It's leading to change. So I do not expect of us to be miracle workers. If this day ends in this conversation that we have today, this is why I jumped on this conversation, if we can have one more person participate in a process that would have otherwise not participated, today is a better day for Cameroon.
You mentioned the communique. Let me go back to it. You said the choice is no longer between political personalities. It is between continuity and rupture, between silence and accountability, between decay and rebirth. So we are at the point where on one side you're talking about personalities, on the other side you're talking about a system that has been perpetuating itself since 1960. But the candidates we're saying here, Elo Buba, Chiruma, who are the most spoken about right now, and they stand a chance of leading the opposition in this election, have been part of this since the 1960s. So somebody who is watching this program now, who has read this communique, listens to you and hears from you that you would support a Chiruma or a Bello if that is a consensus candidate. Should that person be asking myself, wow, what rupture are we talking about here?
Absolutely, that person should be concerned. That person should be asking themselves that question. But those are the cards that we have been dealt. That's the situation that we face. You have a choice.
Breaking a system by electing its own very elements back into the system. Is that a choice we have?
This is as bad as that sounds. These are the cards that we have been dealt. We can complain about it, or we can make the best out of it. Make the best out of a bad situation.
That is the best I want to understand. We are breaking a system. It is either breaking the system or maintaining the system. And this system has been made with people like Bello Buba and Chiruma. So if we are breaking the system and they are the consensus candidate that Project C is going to support, if there is a consensus candidate, Project C is going to support that candidate. And if any of these two